Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Hey guys, I'm back with Claudine, and now we're talking about the new fall exhibitions happening in Paris. So if you're coming, you need to know what's going on. Claudine's got all the information.
Yeah, there is a few things other than Notre Dame happening in Paris, although that's all I could think about. But what is so wonderful as well about the Olympics being over is that we have now returned to normalcy in the museums, and we have moved past all of the dumb things that they did around sports. And it was only dumb because after the 20th exhibit, what else is there to show when it comes to sports and art?
Yeah, definitely. We want more.
Yeah, so it was, I think that those were, I think that they probably regret that because people were not going to those exhibits, especially during the Olympics, because Paris was a ghost town and nobody was in the museums. But I don't know why they would have thought as well that the people coming to watch the Olympics would also say, hey, I think I want to go to an exhibit and see how they make sports bras.
Wow, okay.
Because that was one of the exhibits.
Interesting.
I did not go to that one. I was like, I love museums and I love exhibits, but I'm going to pass on these.
I agree.
But there has been some really exciting ones, and I can't wait to share a couple of them with some details and that you have to go and see. The first two I will tell you about are at the Orsay. And this one, I was so excited. I was more excited about this one than when we had the Impressionist exhibition in the spring. But this one is about the artist Gustave Caillebotte. And we have mentioned him maybe once or twice when we've talked about some of the Impressionists. But he is one of the biggest supporters of the Impressionism and of those artists. And he was also one himself. He was born in 1848, and he received a very large inheritance after his father died in 1874. And then he was just a year after that, he entered the École des Beaux-Arts. With his new wealth, he began to support his fellow artists and purchase many of their pieces, which at the time, of course, were deemed horrific by the public and the art critics. The paintings that he purchased were from Monet, Pissarro, Degas, Manet, and many of the other Impressionists. And he did it just to kind of support them and help them out. After his mother passed away, he received even more money. So he was very, very wealthy. And Monet really liked that because Monet was always on the verge of bankruptcy at every few minutes. Caillebotte joined the first exhibition in 1874 by showing 8 of his own paintings, including the very famous The Floor Scrapers. I love this painting, but I love even more his private collection. On November 8th, 1876, after the death of his younger brother, he drew up a will. So he wasn't very old at the time. He was born in 1848. So he wasn't even 30 years old. And he was just always because I think he lost his mother and his father and now his younger brother. He drew up a will. And in this will, he gave 68 paintings from his collection, but he stipulated that they could not go into the attic, but into the Musée de Luxembourg and eventually the Louvre. At the time, the Luxembourg was the one that was for the only museum that was for living artists, because at the Louvre, you had to be dead for 10 years before your art was in the Louvre. So he put the stipulation. On February 21st, 1894 when he died of a stroke while working in his garden. The next day, his will was read. The French state did not agree with these conditions as the Impressionists were still not accepted, but Renoir was his executor in the end. And with the help of a few fellow artists, including Monet, they helped fight to get his last wish, but only 38 of the paintings were accepted by the state. They were offered again in 1904 and 1908, but the state still said no. In 1928, they returned and wanted the rest of the donation, but his brother's widow politely declined. So when he first gave them, the French government was like, no, we don't want these. Nobody wants these. And then they finally took 38. And then when 1928, when everybody said, oh, Impressionism is wonderful, they were like, hey, give us the rest of the stuff. And the family's like, nope, you snooze, you lose.
I love it. You snooze, you lose.
But there's a few things that are like amazing, like some of Monet's, the Gare Saint Lazare, he had one in the collection, but he also had the other ones, some other ones that the French government passed on, and now those are in other collections or in private collections, which is even sadder. But the special exhibit, the Orsay, that opened in October, focuses on the artist and the male figure that he often painted, like the famous floor scrapers. The best news, though, is the majority of the Caillebotte painting collection of others is also on display on the fifth floor of the Orsay. The exhibit is fantastic, and it focuses on those paintings. And I had somebody, when I mentioned this on Instagram, somebody asked if he was gay, if that's why he always painted men. But the reason why this subject matter is pretty easy. This was in the last quarter of the 19th century. Caillebotte lived during the time of Napoleon III and Baron Haussmann, when the city was rapidly changing. While the streets took on a dramatic new look, society was still stuck in the past because women were not really a part of it. They could only be seen outside the home if they were with their husband. And if they are seen outside, it was most likely that they were doing our favorite of their jobs, the courtesans.
The best job in the world.
It does sound better than saying our favorite prostitutes, but they were normally, if you would see a woman out, they were deemed to be a prostitute because women weren't really allowed to go sit in restaurants or walk on the street without a man.
Yikes.
Yeah, which, somehow it seems like in some places we're reverting to this again. But also at the exhibit is the painting called A Rainy Day in Paris, which is a very famous painting. It's one of his most famous pieces. It was painted in 1877. It has a couple walking in the rain underneath an umbrella, and it's normally the Art Institute in Chicago, but it's here in Paris, which is really exciting. And one of the best part of any exhibit is when you get to see pieces coming from other museums or private collections that you can't see. I don't feel that way when they leave, when the pieces from France leave, but it is nice to share with other people. But it's fascinating. I love this exhibit. Definitely go and see this. Does not have the crowds that like the Van Gogh or the Impressionists had. But sometimes it is still good to book also the slot for the exhibit as well when you book your ticket, just to be safe, or you might just wait a little bit. But also make sure you go to the fifth floor to check out the rest of his private collection, which I love almost even more. Some of the most famous, like the balcony done by Manet, that was the first painting he did of our girl Bart Morisot. That was one that he owned. Quite a few very famous paintings he actually owned. But if you're in LA or Chicago, you're in luck because the exhibit comes in February. It runs in Paris till January 19th. Then it goes to the J. Paul Getty Museum in LA from February 25th to May 25th. Then goes to Chicago from June 29th to October 5th. So if you're in any of those places and you can't get to Paris, you're very lucky. Also, another exhibit at the Orsay, which is probably one not a lot of people are put on their radar or are going to, is an exhibit dedicated to a female artist that few will know. I didn't really know anything about her, but then of course I became obsessed with it. It's a exhibit of Harriet Becker, and she was one of those famous artists from Norway. She was born in 1845 and was inspired by the Impressionists and their use of color. She began training in 1860 and moved to Berlin 6 years later. Then she discovered a like-minded group of other female artists who would influence each other the rest of their life. She ended up in Paris for 10 years after going to Berlin and Florence and Munich. And then in Paris, she studied under Jean-Léon Germain. Her paintings feature mostly household interior scenes with people in it and also a lot of greenery in the image, kind of giving it a style all her own. Once she returned to Norway, she started painting a series of church interiors, which are also really fantastic. This exhibit runs to January 12th, and I really beg people to go because it really was fantastic. And, who I might need to do a whole episode just about her because it was really fantastic at a time when women didn't really get to do that. But like Rose that we talked about, Bonheur, she was really huge and really popular at a time when women really weren't as artists.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many people that, they need to get the attention now.
Yeah, so it's a really fantastic exhibit. They will also have opening up this week. There is going to be two exhibits dedicated to Notre Dame, just two small exhibits within the Orsay, and we're going to talk about that a little bit next week when I talk about some other exhibits that you can see in Paris just about Notre Dame. And now we're going to go over to my favorite place, the Louvre. One exhibit that's open in a very historic section of the museum was extended, thankfully, to January 6th, or else it would have been closed already. The masterpieces of the Torlonia collection opened in June and was extended to January 6th, and it is held in the former summer apartments of Anne of Austria. Now, these rooms of the Louvre, they're underneath the Apollo Gallery in the Denon wing. And these rooms have been closed since before COVID. And I have been clamoring for them to open because the ceilings in there are amazing. And it's one of the only sections of the entire Louvre that the ceilings are exactly the same as they were when they were created.
That is amazing. Everyone should see
And
that.
I have literally spent 4 months doing research on the ceilings, and we will have a whole episode, and I'll do a whole huge video explaining what all the details of the ceiling and what all the paintings mean and the bas reliefs mean, everything. And of course, there's none of this information in one place. So I have been researching for 4 months, and now I was glad that they extended it to January 6th because it gave me 2 more months.
We love that.
But the Torlonia collection was created by the Torlonia family of Italy, which required a vast amount of money in banking and counted the Bonapartes as their clients in the 19th century at the beginning, when the atelier of the sculptor and restorer Bartolomeo Cavaceppi, I'm really bad at the Italian ones because I see everything is French, became available, the Prince Giovanni Torlonia purchased more than 1,000 pieces, which was documented by Ennio Visconti, who would later be the curator of the Louvre and the father of Louis Visconti, who was the architect that doubled the size of the Louvre under Napoleon III. At the beginning of the 19th century, the Giustiniani family used their Roman statuary collection as collateral for a loan from the bank. When they defaulted, over 400 pieces were added to the Torlonia booty, hidden from the public until 1870 when Alessandro turned the family palace on the Via della Lungara into the museum for the Accademia. So they opened this up as a museum, but really it was only for a very small group of people that would be invited. But mostly it was used for art students to come and sketch. 90 years later, the museum was completely closed in the 1870s or 1970s, and the contents were boxed up and stored away. The Italian government has been trying to negotiate with the Torlonia family to purchase the antiquities, but they just keep reaching a dead end. But in 2020, they let 100 pieces added to the a museum in Rome before it moved to Milan. But today you could see part of the collection for the very first time ever outside of Italy. And pretty much, not many people have seen this collection at all in 50 years. But it is now in the Louvre until January 6th, and it's in the summer apartments of Anne of Austria. But when you go in there, make sure you look up at the ceilings. And we will talk about all of the ceilings and everything in these rooms shortly. But when this closes on January 6th, those rooms will close. They will not open until 2027 and probably the very end of 2027 because the Louvre is putting in a new department there of Byzantine art and art from the time of Christianity. And so they are going to be doing a whole huge thing. It's been closed since 2019. Let's just get on it, people.
Yeah, seriously, come on, step it up.
I mean, these ceilings, these rooms are gorgeous, and it kills me that they're going to be closed for that long. But I guess we've waited 5 years for Notre Dame. I could probably make it 2.5, 3 years.
Do it.
Another one that's a very small exhibit that the Louvre has been doing. This is the second time they've done this. It's called A Revoir Watteau. This one goes until February 3rd. It's in the Soli wing on the first floor. So when you are standing at the pyramid and you look back, you see the clock tower. That's exactly where it is on the first floor. We had talked about Watteau before because we did a whole episode about the painting that he had, the small painting, L'Indifferent, that was stolen from the Louvre. And I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes so you can listen to it if you have missed it. But Watteau he did not live to be very old, and he died at 37, and he did not start painting these masterpieces that he would do until later. And so this piece that he did that is Piero, which is a Italian actor, comedian, and he's in this little, kind of almost like an Italian clown, is probably the best way to describe it. It is a very famous painting, but they took it off display for 2 years and they restored it. And in the restoration, they found that there was an extra 6 inches of the painting that had been rolled up around the chassis, around the frame. And so they were able to undo that and completely restore it. And you could actually see, if you get it just in the right light, you could kind of see where the indentation of the fold was. But it's amazing. And 2 years it took to restore this painting. But this exhibit is really great because when you walk in, you see the painting straight ahead. But if you start on the right, and it takes you through the Italian theater and why this was kind of a subject that was painted often. He did many sketches and smaller paintings of it. And then you get to see the fantastically restored part of the painting. The whole thing has been restored, but behind it is a wall, and on this wall they have it's about a 4-minute video, and this video is fantastic because it tells you how they restored it and gives you the before and after of the painting itself. And when you look at like his little face and the color of the white costume that he has on, it's stunning. And I wish every time they did a restoration they had something like that, because I think more people would really be interested in it, because it's really amazing to see how they do it. And I'll put some pictures, and I even videoed that little video, so maybe I could put it up.
Video of a video.
The video of the video. But the painting itself is not mentioned until Vivant Denon, who was the first curator of the Louvre. He mentioned it in 1805 because he purchased it for 150 francs. It later, after he died, went to his nephew. His nephew ended up selling it to the Marquise de Sivert, who later sold it to the doctor who changed the Louvre, Dr. Louis Lacaze, who in 1865 gave the largest donation in the museum's history of 583 paintings, which included 19 Watteau paintings, including that one we talked about that was stolen. And before that, the Louvre only had one Watteau painting, and now they have 20. So that was a huge thing for the collection of the Louvre. And it's really fantastic. The restorers of the C2RMF, which is the greatest restorers in the world, that are located in the building of the Palais de Louvre. It's just really amazing to see that. And it's really cool because the other side of the room shows how it has influenced other artists, including of the stage, Sarah Bernhardt, which we've talked about and we love, Greta Garbo, and also in paintings by Picasso and Jean Gris and Andre Derain. And you have those there. So it's really a unique way to see this. And it's kind of cool that they do this. So at first, when they were going to do this about the Van Eyck back in the summertime, they also did kind of the same thing about the history of it, what inspired him, and then how his painting inspired others. So it's really cool, and it's just a small room. So for me, I spent like an hour and a half in there. Most people would probably spend 20 minutes, but it's really great. But here's a fun little insider fact that people probably don't know, that this painting, when Beyonce and Jay-Z made that video in the Louvre, they worked specifically with the curator of paintings, and she was the one who, that was her very favorite painting, the one of Pierrot, and so she basically made them put it into the video.
I love that. That's so interesting.
And most of the images they put in there, a lot of them feature Black models. So you have the Madeleine, you have the Raft of the Medusa, you have all these other ones, which was fantastic that they were showcasing those. And so then everyone, and then here comes this Italian kind of actor slash clown. But it is the restoration work on it is amazing. And if you could read French, and even if you can't, you just want to get it translated, the book that came with the exhibit, the books that they've done for the exhibits over the last year and a half or two have been fantastic. They have a new publisher that's doing them, and they are fantastic, and they are filled with so much great information. So if you're really a super nerd like me, and you're here, get the book, or even order it and get it back to you in the US if you can't come. But this exhibit will go until February 3rd. There's also one more in there that's kind of the largest exhibit of the year. It's in the Hall Napoleon, and this is underneath as you're going back to the Sully wing. So if you're coming in on the ground under the pyramid, you just keep going straight under the Sully wing. It's the hugest exhibition room, and it's been fully restored, and it looks great. But the exhibit is called basically the Figure de Feu. So it's like the figures of crazy is basically what it means. And it is really interesting. It's chronological, and it's art predominantly featuring the idea of crazy. So it's for religious themes that were a big part of the medieval era. And then was because it was created for churches. Eventually, the figures of court jesters, carnival figures, folklore, and mythological and allegorical figures were all added with a little bit of an air of craziness and fun to them. Once the jesters became a part of the king's court, it became more acceptable, and sometimes a little less frightening. Some of them, to be honest, it's a little scary. But I think they specifically made sure it was open around Halloween. But the space is amazing, and it's really great because it kind of tracks how this is perceived throughout art from the Middle Ages, the medieval time, all the way up until the 19th century. That one also goes to February 3rd. And then elsewhere, there at the Picasso Museum, there is an exhibit that just opened all about Jackson Pollock and his first years from 1934 to 1947. That goes until January 19th. In the Jacquemart André is the masterpieces of the Borghese Gallery. The Jacquemart André has also been closed for about 9 months. They did a big restoration and cleanup. But, to be honest with you, it is one of the worst places to see an exhibit. So if you're going to go, because they do beautiful, beautiful exhibits, but because this was a former home and it had to stay exactly the way our girl, Jacquemart wanted, they're tiny, tiny rooms. So this is like going into a Parisian house where the rooms are tiny, and they have this amazing art in there, but then there's just too many people. And one time I got pushed and shoved so many times by people that were, 70 years old, not even like just rude kids, grown adults pushing and shoving. I finally walked out. So if you're going to go, choose your time accordingly and go first thing in the morning, avoiding a weekend, or go at the end of the day in like the last hour and a half of the museum, because then you'll enjoy it a lot more. If you like pop art, go to the Fondation Louis Vuitton. There's a huge Pop Forever exhibit that features Warhol and many other artists. And if you're there, you could take a brave walk through the Bois de Boulogne and go to the Musée Marmottan Monet to see a whole exhibit based on trompe l'oeil going back from to 1520 to today. And then one I'm really excited about that I'm going to go see this weekend is at the Carnavalet, and it's Paris 1793 to 1794, covering one specific year of the Revolution.
Oh my God, there's so much good stuff coming. I'm excited.
I know, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. But next week, we're going to talk about three about Notre Dame you could see. And one of them I have been waiting to go for months, and I can't wait. So I can't wait to share that with you because I'm going to go right as it opens.
All right, guys. Well, make sure you head over to ClaudineHemingway.com to learn more. Follow her on Instagram and make sure you tune in next week. Thanks for listening today, guys. If you're interested in learning more about Claudine, her tours, history, and the beautiful photographs that she posts all over Instagram, tune into her website, ClaudineHemingway.com.